Jim. I'm the real original Dungeons and Dragons handbook. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Original Dungeons and Dragons handbook.
What are we going to talk about in this video?
We're going to talk about a book. Handbook.
What book? Me?
No, we're going to talk about something that's related to you called Tales of Peril.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to get started.
Let's jump into it.
Let's get started, viewers. Whoa! I'm back.
So am I.
I'm here for the first time.
Yeah, you weren't here a few minutes ago.
Hey, gang.
With a book in front of your face? Not at all, no.
Same shirts. No waiting.
Again, they're not, unless they watch these one after another, nobody's going to pick up on
That does happen super often,
Oh,
though.
I'm sure it does.
But today, what are we going to be talking about?
Today, not the same day that we filmed our other video
Nope.
that we're wearing the same shirts in. This is a totally separate day, totally different
day.
subject.
It's just coincidence.
We're going to be talking about a book that I picked up a couple of years ago. I've been meaning to do a video about it because I think it's really cool. It is a book called Tales of Peril. Now, this book was published in 2017 by Black Blade Publishing here in the United States. And what it is a collection of stories that were written by a man named John Eric Holmes. For those of you who have watched our videos for any length of time, you may have seen one called The Most Important D&D Book You've Never Heard of. I think that's what we titled it. It was
one of our more popular videos.
It was a while back. That book that you've probably never, the most important book you've probably never heard of is this one. This is the Holmes Basic Edition D&D book that came out in the late 70s. What happened I'll do a quick recap on that for those of you who might not have seen that video, but go and check it out if you're interested in early D&D history. Because I believe that this book is one of the, if not the most important Dungeons and Dragons book ever published. Not in terms of the content for the game, but in terms of
being formative.
Exactly, and bringing fantasy role-playing to the masses. I think that this is the book that is actually responsible for that.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, watch the video, see if you think the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, this book, there was a man by the name of John Eric Holmes back in the day. He was a neuroscientist, really interesting guy. He was a Korean War veteran. He taught at, University of California, Santa Barbara, I think. I'll check it in a second. But he started playing, he learned about Dungeons and Dragons from some younger people. He was a father himself at the time that he started playing. He learned about Dungeons and Dragons from some younger people, but this was 0 edition Dungeons and Dragons, which was not the easiest game in the world to learn. If you're a war gamer, which many of us were back in those days, it was much easier to pick up because it was kind of a game, a fantasy role-playing game that was written for war gamers.
It was the next generation, next step in gaming.
There you go. And John Eric Holmes really loved the game, thought it was fantastic. He introduced he took to running a 0 edition game for his kids, which I think is really cool. I mean, it must be really neat to have a father who teaches you how to play Dungeons and Dragons and then runs games for you while you're growing up.
It was pretty cool. I'm a super big nerd.
Anyway, John Eric Holmes, he played 0 edition D&D, but again, it was a little bit complicated. He ended up approaching Gary Gygax and saying, hey, would it be possible for me to edit the rules into a basic book, a basic manual, if you will, that would make it easier for people who have no wargaming experience to get into the game? Gary Gygax said yes. The rest is history. This is the book that John Eric Holmes came out with.
Started it all.
And it's still a very readable book. The Tower of Xenopus, which is the introductory module that he created for this game, is still very playable. I can't speak enough of the man. I'm a really big fan. But John Eric Holmes also dabbled in creative writing. And so he wrote fantasy fiction. I believe he wrote some science fiction, but I think it was mostly fantasy fiction. In 2017, some people got together and decided, including John Eric Holmes' son and some people who used to play in his world when John Eric Holmes was running his games in the 70s. They got together and decided that it would be a cool thing to gather up a lot of the information and stories that John Eric Holmes had put together back in the day and had published in various locations like in Alarms and Excursions, a fan magazine that we've talked about in the channel from time to time. It would be neat if they gathered all those things together and put them into a book, and this is the result. Now, the cool thing to me about this, the really cool thing, I mean, I love the fact that it's just from John Eric Holmes, because I think that I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for the development of Dungeons and Dragons. But, or not the development of, but for the dissemination of Dungeons and Dragons to the world. But to me, the really neat thing about this is that a lot of the stories in here are actually taken directly from the games that he used to run with his sons and his sons' friends. And so when you read this, the first one being Tales of Peril, as soon as I started reading it was like, oh my God, I'm reading a late 1970s Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Because it hit me within about 3 paragraphs in. I thought, this has got to be somebody's written description of a game. That's exactly what it was. Now, and to me, that's really a neat thing about it. There are also some other aspects of this book that I really enjoy. One of them being the artwork. I'll try and make this available. I'll see if I can find a way to get this online. But this was made specifically for this game. For this book, and it was done by a man named Ian Bagley, and to me this has got such an old school feel. It's almost it's almost palpable in your mind.
Look at that.
It's really something.
Come on, yeah.
But it goes so well to illustrate the adventure inside. It was almost like he played in the game himself. Ian Bagley played in the game himself. But really cool stuff about John Eric Holmes is also listed in here. There are a bunch of things about the things that he accomplished outside of just playing Dungeons and Dragons, but also other things that he contributed to the game that were not necessarily about playability. John Eric Holmes was a neuroscientist, and one really interesting thing that he ended up writing, if I can find the actual name of it. This is called Confessions of a Dungeon Master. It was originally published in Psychology Today, Volume 14, Number 6, November of 1980. So this is a scholarly look at Dungeons and Dragons,
which is cool,
back in the day. And to a lot of people, this is still one of the best introductory descriptions of Dungeons and Dragons and its effect on players that you're going to find. It's still referenced from time to time. The primary characters in this, there's one character named Boinger, there's another one named Zareth. Those are actually the names of the characters of his sons, I believe, or one of his sons and one of his son's best friend. So it's not just one story. There are actually quite a few different stories that use the same characters. But there are also, outside of those stories, there are recollections by the friends of John Eric Holmes' sons who used to play and what they remembered of playing with John Eric Holmes as a dungeon master, which to me is also just a really cool thing to be able to read and experience. Again, if you want to get into the mindset and what was going on around the table with Dungeons and Dragons in the late 1970s. Yeah. This is a perfect snapshot window into that. Snapshot window, I kind of combined something there. It's a perfect window into that time frame.
And this is a really cool book. And if you've watched any of our videos for any length of time, you may have picked up on the fact that technically both of us are trained as historians. It's what he does for a living. It's what he did for a living. It's kind of what I do for a living now. And so history. Well,
you're headed that direction even more every day.
Yeah, headed that direction. So anything that has to do with history, especially when it comes to gaming history, we both have thought for a long time isn't something that's recorded or ever taken seriously, even though things like Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games are critical in the cultural development of the U.S.
I agree.
Like we talked about that a lot in the Satanic Panic videos that we put out. We went into that in great detail about how this is very formative in American popular culture and how it influences a lot of things today. But when you actually get into the nitty-gritty specifics of what was happening in these games, what people were playing, what stories they came up with, how they influenced actual people in real time, that's almost something that's never been discussed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff talking about Gary Gygax, talking about TSR, talking about a lot of these big name players who created the game and then furthered its development down the line. But when it comes to actual people who played the game, there's almost nothing that talks about what people actually went through, the adventures they went on. I think that that's super important because there have been millions of stories that have come up that people have created over the years playing these games, and a lot of them are just going to be completely lost to history and they're never going to be repeated in any capacity. But this, for some reason, this aspect, this version of storytelling that people have come up with through these games isn't viewed as significant as other forms of storytelling. And I don't think that's the case. That's how it should be at all, because they're very creative and there's a lot of very important things that have gone on that just haven't been recorded.
We're kind of digressing away from the actual intent of this video, which is the Tales of Peril book, which encapsulates exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you're interested in those early Dungeons and Dragons stories, the way the game was seen, the way the game was played, what kind of adventures people were going on, you can't do any better than picking up a copy of Tales of Peril and reading through it. It's a fun read by one of my favorite contributors to the whole genre of Dungeons and Dragons, John Eric Holmes.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get a hold of. I don't think the print run was terribly large, and I don't know, you might be able to get this on the secondary market now. But again, if you get the chance, if you're interested in D&D history, Tales of Peril by John Eric Holmes, Black Blade Publishing, came out in 2017. I believe it was.
Yeah, that's what you said earlier.
2017. Have a look.
Yeah.
Pick it up. Start to delve into the way people were playing the game and what kind of adventures they had back in the day.
Some things to close out the video with. I think this is as good a time as any to say that we actually really, really enjoy hearing your guys' comments about your experiences with the game.
Without a doubt, yeah, it's fun. It's fun to read.
Especially when it comes to like the specifics of what you did in certain campaigns and stuff like that. So I think this is a...
We have... I won't mention names, but we do have one of our Patreon subscribers.
Oh, yeah.
He fills us in on his adventure, and we're living vicariously through his adventures. I mean, he gives us updates all the time, and they're great. They're fun for us to read.
Yeah, we would love to hear some of your stories, just because we're talking about the importance of the individual adventers. Tell us about your adventures down below. We'd love to hear about them.
Yeah.
Alongside that, mentioning Patreon, thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers, all of our patrons. We couldn't do this without you. We're very, very grateful. We're hoping to have some awesome new content headed your guys' way specifically. If any of you watching this video are interested in becoming patrons of the channel and of the site, the link for that is down in the description below. It's just extra content. When we film podcasts, we make videos, we do bonus secondary sections a lot that we put up there, and we also make specific videos. We do polls. You can have better interactions with us if you want to talk to us and ask us questions. It's a great place to do it. But if you're not interested in doing that, no worries at all. Just come back to the regular YouTube channel. We'll have a lot of good stuff for you guys here too. So
Tales of Peril, John Eric Holmes, Black Blade Publishing. I'm having a hard time saying that. Black Blade Publishing, 2017. Take a look, see if you can find it. It's a great read, a lot of fun.
Yes, go check it out.
Aside from that, I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep that sword arm free.
Bye-bye now.